Good morning, everyone. There is a quorum in the room, so I ask you to take your seats so we can get started. So welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a pleasant summer and are ready for a busy fall, because I think we certainly have a busy fall ahead of us. So we'll start with declarations of interest. Seeing none, confirmation of minutes 5, June 18th, 2015. Carried? Thank you. Item number 1, we'll go through the consent agenda. Item number 1 is Crime Prevention Ottawa Annual Action Report. Crime Prevention Ottawa is in attendance this morning. They have a presentation if you'd like one, but you want one? Sure. Okay, so we will hold that and come back to it for the presentation. Item number 2, commemorative naming Brian Parsons Park. Carried? Item number 3, status update, Community and Protective Services Committee inquiries and motions for the period ending August 13th, 2015. Received? Thank you. Item number 4, community garden update. Again, there is a brief presentation, but only if the committee would like to hear it. Right, we could just approve that, the recommendation. You have questions, so we'll hold that. Do you want the presentation? Okay, so we'll hold it for the presentation and questions. Item number 5, strategic initiative number 38, 10-year housing and homelessness plan. There are obviously recommendations here, but also there is a brief presentation if the committee would like the presentation. Yes? Okay, so we'll hold for the presentation. Item number 6, partnership program for major festivals, fairs, and special events revisions. Carried on that one?
Just one question.
Question?
Yeah.
So we'll hold for questions. All right, so that's the end of the consent agenda. So we'll start with item number 1, Crime Prevention Ottawa.
They've all seen this presentation.
That's okay. You still got a part on.
Could you please get it going?
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you very much for letting us put a presentation together for you this morning. Basically, the presentation is about the work of the Crime Prevention Ottawa and their plans going forward. And our priorities for this plan going forward is violence against women is one, neighborhoods, safety in neighborhoods, and youth in the neighborhoods and in the city. So those are 3 of the priorities, along with the other previous priorities that we worked on back in 2013, 2014. And we're just trying to get this presentation put together because I was under the impression that we weren't doing a presentation this morning, but we do have a presentation that the committee members have seen previously, and that's what we will present as soon as we get it up and running.
Go get Francine.
And we will be glad to answer any questions if you have any questions.
Francine, you're going to have to come.
Okay, so we're going to dispense with the presentation since it's the same one we've already seen, and we're going to go straight to questions, and we'll start with Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure whether the delegates are prepared to provide at least an oral year in review summary or update. I like many of my colleagues, have seen the presentation that's in front of us on our screens, but can you describe the year that was, how things went, whether or not your objectives were met, whether you've measured success? Like, how do you determine whether the year was successful or not? That's the type of information I was hoping to get today, and I want to give you that opportunity, and maybe if you don't have that information, sure, we can follow up and get it another time. But
I'm happy to say that Crime Prevention Ottawa has multiple projects in many different spheres. Each one of those is progressing at a different pace. We're just still trying to, we were not expecting to do a presentation. Francine, do it.
Okay, just to be clear, though, I said if the committee asked for a presentation, then do a presentation. So that's totally within the prerogative of the committee. And
Understood.
Yeah.
So with regards to the different projects, I want to go through them by subject matter. So get that up as soon as possible. With regards to violence against women, we had a great deal of success with the I Can Manifest Change project. We were able to reach tens of thousands of young men in Ottawa through a social media campaign which was in partnership with the Ottawa Police and the Ottawa Coalition to End Violence Against Women. We also work extensively with the school boards through a project called the 4th R, which is reading, writing, arithmetic, and relationships. So, which is taught by what we do is we train and support teachers to deliver a healthy relationships curriculum, which addresses a triad of risk factors of sexuality, healthy relationships and violence, and substance abuse. And it's at the confluence of those three that relationship violence happens most of the time. So we've been able to deepen our partnerships with the school boards, and particularly in regard to the changeover in the curriculum in phys ed. We've found a strategic opportunity to deepen our relationship with open it, just double click on it, with the school board. So we're very pleased with the progress on that. There are multiple other projects on the subject of violence against women. With regards to neighborhoods, we have been working closely with a number of neighborhoods over the years, and get rid of the allow. Just a second. Okay. Oh, and for next year, our big project will be Man Up, which is a project based in the high schools. And you may have seen some news coverage with regards to sexual assault at mass gatherings. Based on some research with the Ottawa Hospital, we have developed a partnership with the Sexual Assault Network to address sexual assault at major events, with a focus on festivals such as Escapade and others. So on neighborhoods, our big project this year has been working with Cedarwood, which is a neighborhood which experienced some issues, but they have been working extremely well together. They've identified a large number of stakeholders in the neighborhood and are working together. We're also piloting in the West End the multi-stakeholder approach to problem addresses, which we're quite excited about, and the Home Takeovers project, which examines the vulnerability of individuals who find themselves unsafe in their own homes through either drug dealers or others taking over their apartments for the purposes of crime. And that also has been able to reach large numbers of community stakeholders. And we, in June, released 8 training videos, and we're doing training with various community safety providers. And on the gang strategy, we have 4 big focuses: the healthy neighborhood cohesion, early prevention, intervention, and enforcement. The city kindly gave us extra money to do the exit strategy, and that is getting up and going this summer after having been approved at our board in May. And we are working closely with the John Howard Society, the Ottawa Community Immigrant Services Organization, and the Ottawa Police on that. We funded 8 Painted Up Youth Engagement mural projects, and we continue to engage with the community on strategic projects. So I'm sorry, I hope that answers your question.
I think that I'll follow up with you and the councillor in the short term. I'm looking at the investment the City of Ottawa has made in crime prevention. Ottawa, I read about $650,000. I think you do a lot of great work. I'm just looking for a little more detail on how those monies are invested, and you've gone through a lot of those projects today. But also, you must have statistics about particularly issues revolving around women. One of your foci is the violence against women, or I'd like to know what the statistics were before the investment and whether it be reported numbers of harassment or sexual abuse or other types of abuse. The program went in place, and then you measure afterwards, so whether there are some measures of success. How do we know that your programs are successful? And I'm not saying that in a combative way. I just want to make sure that the right programs are in place and that they are truly reaching the right people and that they're rolled out successfully. And I don't expect you to have that fulsome answer here on the spot, but I'd like to sit down with you again and have that type of conversation.
Certainly, and we did do an analysis of results in our neighborhood-based work, and I'm happy to share that with you as...
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Anyone else? Just to follow up on Councillor Barkington, just one question about the exit strategy. If you could just outline the expected outcomes from that and how you would measure success of that particular program.
The exit strategy is focusing on prolific, high-risk offenders. So the way that the success of that is measured, because there's a great deal of research with regards to prolific offenders, there are technical risk assessments, and the agencies that we're working with are using an assessment tool called it's called SPIN, and I can't remember what it stands for right this second, but it measures 90...
Unfortunate name.
Yes. It measures 90 different variables with regards to risk, with regards to the personal, social, family, behavioral, emotional connections with regards to the individual, what they're doing with their time, and so on. So what it measures is reductions in risk and reductions in severity of behavior. So that's how we will be measuring the outcomes with regards to reductions of risk.
So not at all in terms of how many people you may have diverted away from a life of crime.
But that's the reduction of risk. But the idea is that it's a life of crime, but also their life of crime may be driven by, for example, their addictions. So are there also reductions in that? Because unless you address a spectrum of issues within somebody's life, the risk remains until you've addressed a wide spectrum of. So there's the criminal offending, but there's also the motivators for the offending, such as the addictions, such as the lack of attachment to family and to appropriate legal sources of income. So you need to measure all of that for long-term risk reduction.
And would you have any sort of target number of how many individuals you'd be positively impacting through this program?
The number that we had said was we were intending to work with 30.
30. Okay, so you'd be measuring success through that SPIN
Yes.
tool, and hoping to have achieved that in the range of 30 individuals.
Reduction of risk with regards to those 30 individuals, yes.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Thank you for being here, and I'm sorry we caught you off guard. I thought we were clear that if the committee wanted a presentation, you'd be prepared to give it, so.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, we do know about the presentation. Like I said, most of the colleagues have already seen that presentation, and that's why we weren't prepared to present that this morning. But going back to my colleague, Councillor Brockington's questions and stuff, more than happy to answer those questions, and if you want that brought back to committee, we will be more than happy to do that also.
Thank you. Okay, received on the report? Thank you again.
Thank you.
Next held item is item number 4, the community garden update. And there is a brief presentation. Well, they asked for the presentation.
Voilà. Can you move them for me? Okay. Thanks very much, Chair. Sorry for the delay. We just had to get the presentation loaded up. Just go to the first slide. So this will be a relatively brief update with respect to community gardening. Essentially, the community gardening program within the City of Ottawa is a community initiative, and it's very community-led. And we know that this does tremendous benefits in terms of community development, the civic participation, and awareness. And what Council originally supported and has developed over the years is what we refer to internally as sort of a low-cost, no-cost approach to community gardening, very much in terms of identifying the lands and then allowing the community to largely develop them. What we have seen in the last few years is certainly the complexity in developing and maintaining the gardens has started to go up. This is largely related to a series of regulations and or legislation that does impact what happens on particularly public lands. Whoops, you went the wrong way. So just to give you some very quick stats related to this, in the 1950s there were approximately 2 allotment gardens that were supported in the entire region. By 2009 there were 19, and now at 2015 we're at 59 community gardens. And about 40% of those gardens are actually on city property. The 60% others are on other properties in the community. And so for us, it is an ongoing challenge and a growing challenge to meet all the various requests, and particularly looking at competing interests around the same portions of land. Again, the timeline, in 2009, Council adopted a very formal community gardening policy, and essentially what we're looking at now in 2015 is an adjustment to the base contract for Just Foods for their community gardening network project of about $15,000 a year, because they are continuing to expand and add more gardens continuously. So they need the funds both to support the existing ones as well as to help with the development of new ones. In terms of the city's own response, we have within the department one liaison officer who works directly with Just Foods, and the intent of this is to make sure that we coordinate all the various requests and get it organized between roughly about 12 different departments that are involved in actually signing off on a piece of property being used. But we've made this a very efficient process in terms of being able to get all the answers for them, as well as providing them access to city land, but also things like compost and insurance, which are very key to community groups. That's it. Thank you. We're happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, and we'll start with Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. This is certainly a project that is very well received in River Ward. I note there are 3 from your list in River Ward, and I'm closely aware of with two of them, certainly Carlington and Deborah Dines, which I visited both a few times this year already. I just want to get straight to the question with respect to the recommendation that we recommend council approve an additional $15,000 to Just Food Ottawa. What does that $15,000, what will that $15,000 do? What does $15,000 buy us now with the new regulations that are in place?
So what the $15,000 will do is based on conversations with Just Foods in terms of how many gardens are they currently supporting, how many new ones will they be focused on over this particular term, and in order to achieve that there was a shortage of funding, and the estimate they provided to us was around $15,000 to be able to support those. The costs of an individual garden development vary, so some can be $5,000, some are now getting in the $8,000 to $12,000 range in terms of the basics. In addition to those basic elements, there are also examples where individual councillors are also becoming involved in the projects in order to add other features or actually grow them larger, or in some instances to add some very significant elements. And again, when we look at a low-cost, no-cost kind of approach, those were not really included in the original design and concept of the program. So this will buy over the term an estimated additional 20 supported gardens in the community, and it's based on them doing about 4 to 5 annually, which they have been doing to date.
And it's going to be $15,000 per year of this term of council? Or?
This is an adjustment to their base funding, because if they add an additional 20, they'll go from 59 to essentially close to 70.
Okay.
And each garden requires some annual funding on an annual basis, so you begin to thin out the pot after a while. So there's an initial development, but then there are some recurring expenses that they basically provide some very small grants. We're talking about $500 typically to a garden to help with some basic replacement of tools and or other basic costs.
Do we have a long list of community groups that would like to implement a community garden throughout the city that we have not been able to address because there's a lack of funds?
No. At this point, it's more the growth going forward. We do have a list right now, and knowing the ones coming on, that these additional funds will be required over that period to keep the development going. There are a number that are coming on this year, and they're in discussions around those for next year and the year after, for example.
So ultimately, is it Just Food Ottawa who champions the community garden flag, or is it in conjunction? Like, I think we should double or triple the number of community gardens in Ottawa for all the number of factors listed. This is not just community building, but access to healthy food, particularly in areas in River Ward where people do not have convenient access to a grocery store or can even afford to buy vegetables. So is it the long-term plan to fully expand community gardens throughout the city of Ottawa, not just the urban core as well?
So our plan would be to bring back an update at each beginning of each term of council, and what we've identified here is what the plan is essentially for this term of council.
Okay.
But we would be bringing it back because, as you have outlined, there is growth, there is tremendous interest in this. What we do with Just Foods working this through is there are issues such as, is there water sources?
Right.
Is it the appropriate land? Is there contamination? So it takes some time to work through making sure that this is set up properly, it's sustainable, and it works in the overall model, which is very low cost, no cost, as opposed to surprises later on. So there is land, there are things that we're examining, but those are all the components that come together, and I think they are very, very efficient and very effective at getting this done with us.
Good, thank you.
Councillor Kakish.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm very interested in community gardens. I've actually been working with Jordan at Just Food over the last few months, and it's interesting because the challenging aspect is not just the monetary, but actually finding the groups of people on the ground that are interested in maintaining that community garden in the long run, and that's what sometimes can be more challenging depending on where the community is, but they've obviously been very successful across the city. I was just interested in following up a bit on the line of questioning in terms of, given this is a limited amount of money, and there's a lot of factors that determine whether or not we're going to proceed with the community garden. Do we have any strategic sense of how geographically these gardens are going to be located, or is it going to be on a first come, first served basis in terms of the funds?
Essentially, what we're looking at in terms of this is just responding to the demand. So whatever community comes forward and says they want to do this, Just Foods works with them and starts to work through the process. What we've seen is in, for example, the Far East, the community has gone ahead, done a lot of fundraising, done a whole bunch of other things to make sure that they move on the path that they want to go to. This is very much community-led versus a staff-led or a program internal to the city. It's really much to put the seed dollars out there, and then, as you indicated, to have that community come together, decide how they're going to make it, because it does require quite a commitment, and you see that in communities that are ready. The other advantage of the network is they then start to bring people who are contemplating this together with people who've done it 2 or 3 times and know what the challenges are and the things to talk about, the things to think about. So that's the purpose of the gardening neighborhood. Unfortunately, Mo wasn't able to be here today, and she can speak way more passionately about this than I can. She is very, very, very passionate about this. That kind of energy, when you put that into a community, it's amazing what can happen. So that's really, it's about that internal community energy. It's one of our, I would say internally, one of our favorite programs from the perspective of what it gets done from a community development perspective.
And just one last question off the top of your head. Do you know how many communities or how many interested applicants have brought forward proposals that have taken them on at this time?
Off the top of my head, it's very difficult to explain because it requires a bit of exploration. I know there's 12 to 13 that are in exploration, but again, as you pointed out, is the community, is there enough interest? Is it only one person who wants to establish it versus here's how many individuals? What piece of property are you looking at? Have you thought about things like water sources? Have you thought about whether the land can actually accommodate a garden? All those types of things. So at this particular point, we are on a stride where we are meeting what is coming in, and we're getting those gardens out there, making them happen.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kakish. Councillor Kadri.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And my question probably is more for Mr. Chenier regarding the park's usage. I know Councillor Fleury at one point did do some community garden in Gilles Morin Park, and I think using CIL funds or cash in lieu of parkland funds. And as you mentioned, the water source is one of those costly expenses that we need in a community garden. And I just want to clarify that that fund, the CIL fund, could be used for a community garden to upgrade in terms of providing water supply or whatever other needs we need in terms of improving a park by including community gardening.
I don't know if Mr. Chenier wants me to answer. He's going to answer, so I'll be turning his mic on. He's going to answer.
Sure, through the chair. Yes, last year we did get posed a question on the use of CIL funds for community gardens in Councillor Fleury's ward. And so the answer is yes, but with 2 qualifiers. Dr. Burry mentioned that only 40% of the community gardens are on city land. So, of course, the answer is yes for projects that are on city land, mostly parkland. The other qualifier is that it's for the capital items only, so water sources, pathways, accessibility features, the permanent raised beds that would be built, those kinds of things, but not for the incidental equipment side of that operation, tools, hoses, fertilizer, those kinds of things. So for the most part, on city land, we would be able to look at working with councillors and ward CIL funds to support capital portion of those projects.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chenier, and thank you very much for the presentation, Mr. Burry. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kadri. Anyone else? Okay, carried on the recommendation. Okay, thank you. Item number 5, Strategic Initiative number 38, 10-year Housing and Homelessness Plan. And just a comment. No, there's been a request for a presentation.
I don't want your presentation. I just have questions. It was me that requested.
Was it you?
Yeah.
Okay, so does anybody else want the presentation? Okay, let's just go straight to questions then. We'll start with Councillor Fleury.
So, Aaron, I have a question regarding funds on this. I realize there'll be an operational pressure related to this program, but my understanding, and I'm looking for your clarification, is that the clients that are going and receiving the housing with the supports, it's in line with the direction of the 10-year homelessness plan. It's actually going to be a cost saving overall, because that means that person in shelter is costing us more than in this better method, which is them having a unit with the supports that are needed. I just want clarity on that.
So just to give you sort of a general comparison, and the general comparison would be based on having someone who is in a shelter on a daily basis would be about $44 to $45 a day, versus if you have someone in the supportive housing projects that we're talking about as part of this, you're looking in the order of about $28 a day. So there's quite a difference in terms of that daily cost, and depending on the levels of support, it's 45, 36, 28, somewhere in those areas. But that is why we are doing these things, not just from a cost perspective, but to actually move people into permanent housing. So it moves them out of essentially a shelter system in the downtown core into permanent housing, which is more cost effective. And we must do these things because essentially our funding is fixed, and we need to work in it to find more efficient ways to make sure that people are housed.
I like the direction you're going, and I like that we're not keeping people in shelter for the long haul. I wonder if these cost efficiencies kind of scale up to a point where we can actually generate more capital investments to increase the number of programs or numbers of agreements like these.
I think the issue in the longer term in terms of being able to create that extra capital, depending on over the 10-year period what the inflation rate is. So if, for example, in the 44 we're going to 28 and we have a certain amount of savings, but how much does inflation start to eat into essentially the core funding that we're now getting from the province and the federal government, which is essentially fixed? That's really what the issue is for us going forward. If those funds were increasing at the same time, there definitely would be capital available, but where they're not, that's why this investment of $2 million from council is important, because it continues to actually add to the total pot of dollars and actually facilitate that development of new, more, I think, appropriate and smart choices.
Thank you, Councillor Fleury. Councillor Dewars.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through the Chair, my question will be, I'm going to be very optimistic, and let's say there is a saving after we do all this, and I read in a report that will be allocated. Will this committee will receive a report on where the money saved went and which project that we will be spending the money on?
You will get updates with respect to the 10-year plan, absolutely, as well as things like that to demonstrate the response. Recently, we have, for example, also applied, the federal government is looking at doing a bit of an update on homelessness and the numbers and so on. So we've applied to be part of that. They will fund it. We will put people out to provide even more research with respect to that. And in addition, we will be reporting back on progress on the 10-year plan.
Thank you, Councillor Dewars. Anyone else? Carried on the recommendations? Carried. Thank you. Item number 6, Partnership Program for Major Festivals, Fairs, and Special Event Revisions. And Councillor Eglai.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. I noticed in the report that we have changed the requirement for the minimum budget. We've gone from 30,000 up to 50,000, and I for a major event, and I get that. I think it was set in 2002. I mean, prices have gone up and everything. I understand that, but and my question is more around this. This is what we're calling major events. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what is still in place for community-led events that could have budgets well below $50,000, because I don't want to see those community-driven, summer and winter events, carnivals, whatever, held back or impacted negatively by this report. So can you make me feel comfortable that they're also going to be taken care of even if we make these changes?
I will try, through the chair. Councillor, you're right, that when we looked at the 2002 parameters that were set out, the cost of organizing these events has increased significantly, and so we did scale. What staff is recommending is to scale up those numbers to what is the reality of major festivals, and there really are none that have budgets of less than $100,000. There are community, some of the more cultural, smaller cultural community events that do have budgets of less than $100,000, and we thought that the $50,000 was representative of something that is now of the right scale. For those that are less than that, they tend to be new emerging groups and groups that are running much smaller events, and they usually go through our project stream, and there is no change. As you know, the rest of the funding envelopes for cultural funding, we are recommending that it be renewed with the same parameters as before, so they will continue to access those funds. Creating these parameters really excludes no one that is currently being funded in those categories. There is one group that is on the border. They're at 49,000, and I think that is simply working with the group to make the required adjustments. Everybody else is already if they are accessing city fundings, are already accessing another stream, and there are no changes to that, so they'll continue to benefit from those programs.
There was one public delegation that asked to speak if we got into a discussion on this issue. It was Carol Ann Pichichin, the Executive Director of Ottawa Festivals. Does Carol Ann still wish to address the committee? Is she here? Okay. Anyone else on this item? Carried? Thank you. Okay, when we get to inquiries, before we get to inquiries, do we need to close the RPDs? No. Okay, so there's you can tell we've had a summer off. There's lots of inquiries. But before we get to inquiries, during the course of this meeting, Councillor Kakish asked me if I would provide a verbal update to the committee on the taxi issues, so I'd be happy to do that. As you know, the tender for the bid closed on July 30th. That's for the comprehensive taxi review that we're undertaking this fall. The city is currently reviewing the successful proponents and anticipates awarding the contract by the end of August. The strategy for this review was approved by the Community and Protective Services Committee on May 21st and by Council on May 27th of this year. We had originally anticipated the approved strategy would include a report back to the committee by March of 2016, but I've been in discussion with the Mayor and staff to expedite this review if possible. This would see the consultant's report ideally finished by the end of the year, with a report back to the committee early in 2016. As I said to the Mayor, I am in favor of expediting the review, as I understand this is an important issue for the public as well as all industry stakeholders. Having said that, it is absolutely critical that we do our due diligence and ensure that all factors are carefully considered, which must include a fulsome consultation with all interested parties. It is very important, and I think we all know this, it is very important that we get this right. The current activities at the Ottawa Airport, that is a labor dispute between Coventry Connections and one of its bargaining units. The airport is a taxi stand like all others. It's managed with the Airport Authority in conjunction with Coventry Connections. We do not issue separate plates at the airport. All the plates are the same plates regardless. That stand is managed by Coventry with the Airport Authority. Although we respect collective bargaining rights, we also recognize that this demonstration has caused considerable disruption in the community, potentially frustrating their own customer base. To that end, we encourage both Coventry Connection and the taxi union to get back to the bargaining table as soon as possible and get this dispute resolved as soon as possible. I think it's in all of their interest to do so. Are there any questions? Okay, this is not on the agenda, so I'm being told we can't discuss this unless we want to waive the rules.
No, I just wanted to say thank you, Chair. I thought it was important that we get an update from you considering the various media and as well as the concerns that we've been hearing from residents via email, phone calls. So I appreciate the clarification and the update on the next few months.
Okay, great. You're very welcome. Moving to notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meetings. Are there any notices of motion? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to go to inquiries. I think there are a number. I have one. Councillor Egli has one. Councillor Brockington. Anybody else? Okay, so mine is the outdoor swinging season currently runs from the third Saturday in June to the third Sunday in August. This means that depending on the calendar year, our 5 beaches, Britannia, Westboro, Mooney's Bay, Petrie Island, East Bay, and Petrie Island River, are open and supervised for only 58 to 65 days in the season. Ottawa beaches provide residents with recreation opportunities and promote active and healthy lifestyles, and we have received multiple requests to extend the season. Could staff please provide options for committee's consideration on how we can extend the beach season to better reflect Ottawa's summer? Please report back to committee prior to 2016 budget deliberations. Councillor Egli.
Well, you just about took the words out of my mouth, Madam Chair. Perhaps I could do an addendum, if you will, to your inquiry. One of the things that I wanted staff to look at was not necessarily an extension, but what might be the cost or logistics implications of shifting the opening so it's more in concert with the traditional school summer break. So right now we're open while schools are still in session. Could we achieve the same budgetary impact but move it more into the time when parents are on vacation and kids are out of school, so extend it by a further, shift it by about 2 weeks for the start of it, and see if that could be one of the options that's considered.
They can certainly look at that. I left it purposely open-ended to provide any option they would like to provide us in looking at better balancing that season. Okay, so is this a new inquiry?
On your inquiry. It's just because if we tie ourselves to budget only, you guys know this well, I was a city lifeguard for 10 years. There's enough capacity in the system, so...
We're not tying ourselves to budget. It's totally open-ended the way I wrote it.
Perfect.
Well,
it just mentions budget period.
Well, I think if there were to be a budget implication, we'd need to understand that before the budget. That's the only reason I put it in there. Okay. Councillor Brockington.
If I could just add my 2 cents, when that inquiry says all options, community sponsorship, extended days, it doesn't have to be every day of the week. It could just be Friday, Saturday, Sundays. We could have a shorter supervised area, but I'm sure staff will think about all options, and I'll be happy to sit with you as well. My inquiry is with respect to an item we've just dealt with. I'd like to request the criteria that are used to award taxpayer dollars for festivals, fairs, and special events. I'd just like to know how staff go through the long list of requests from the various special events in the city and how monies are allocated towards some and not others. And I'd like to know who received funds in 2015 and what the amounts were. So this is not a rush request, but if I could just know the criteria and who have been the recipients in 2015. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Any other inquiries? Seeing none, under new business, I just wanted to discuss in this forum with Mr. Brewery. The councillors had a letter delivered to their desks this morning in the committee room from SOS Beausoleil, and they are requesting that I place on the agenda for the September 17th meeting a discussion of the child care services plan as it relates to them. And I guess my reluctance in doing that is I don't know that there's a decision point for this council at this time, and I just wondered if you could clarify that issue for the members of the committee.
Yes, Chair, that would be correct. There isn't actually a decision point with respect to child care services that would be plan for September 17th, for example, at this point. Council approved the child care service plan earlier in the winter of this year. We'll be bringing back the next update for the child care services plan early in the next year. There may be other reports that would come forward as we require decisions from committee and council in the interim.
So there would be nothing to discuss on the agenda in September?
We have no item to bring forward. Reports take time to develop and to bring forward to make sure they're properly resourced. So we do not have an item that we're planning for September 17th for childcare.
Could you provide me with some information that I could provide to them in that regard?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, so any other business? Seeing none, adjourn. Thank you all.